always so interesting when I get up to the front here, everybody gets quiet. I demand attention, evidently. My name is Mary Beth Bergeron. I am the president of the Longmeadow Adult Community Center Fund, the nonprofit that supports the center with a lot of learning and later life opportunities here at the center, and this is one of them, obviously. Many of you I know a lot about Fredrick Law Olmstead, and maybe tonight you're going to learn even more and enjoy listening to our speaker, who is an expert in his landscape design. We have, for this year, been sort of focusing, not sort of, laser focusing on the 250th anniversary of our country, highlighting many great people from the beginning of the revolution all the way up to today who have been instrumental in forming the culture of our country. We have had architects. We have had revolutionary speakers. We've had entertainers, all who have provided information to us who are interested in the history of our country. Architecture is part of our culture, whether it's the Roessler building, the Washington Memorial, or the Capitol. It's part of our culture. It's who we are as a people. It represents who we are as a people. So tonight, we're going to talk about landscape architecture, which is not permanent. And we have a great speaker tonight, and I'd like to introduce him as right now. I have to get my glasses on. Before I do that, however, thank you. We've passed out a feedback form, and we would like your feedback. Frankly, not only on this speaker, but on other speakers you may have heard, and perhaps subjects you might want to hear about. Last night, we had an individual come who talked about our second president, John Quincy. I got him actually by accident. I emailed the wrong Adam. That's the gospel truth. And he came here. How many people were here last night? Would you give him a 10 for his lecture last night? He was fabulous. He was just fabulous, totally by accident. So you may have somebody or something you want to hear about, and we'd like to hear from you what you'd like to hear about. So if you could put it on that paper, there's a box in the back, and fill in what you think about tonight, as well as what you might want to hear in the future. We also, as you know, if you've been coming, we've been taping the lectures. They are on YouTube. In the back, you'll find this form that will give you the access on YouTube to these lectures. They're not all up yet. And what we do is we bring the film over to the LCTV. They put it on YouTube, and some of them are going on the local television channel. So if you'd like to see something that you missed, just pick up one of these papers and hook up on your internet. So, all the housekeeping is done. Mark Roessler. As a writer, photographer, and graphic designer, Mark has been producing print and digital publications for more than 30 years. First as a freelance webmaster, later as the managing editor for the Valley Advocate, an alternative weekly newsletter in Western Massachusetts. Last October, his book, Fairstead, was published by Lovers Press in Amherst. The book includes a photographic tour of Olmsted's home and office in Brookline, and 2 essays on how and why he came to build democratic spaces. The public parks of Fredrick Law Olmstead have long been a key interest and inspiration of his, as well as many people here. As an independent journalist, Roessler is currently working documenting all of Fredrick Law Olmsted's parks. The eventual goal is to host an online archive where anyone can visit the catalog of parks in one place. His second book was published in 2021. He published a tour in history of World's End, a property designed by Olmstead in Hingham, Mass. Another book documenting Fort Greene Park in Brooklyn is being published in October of 2026. His website includes interactive tours of 3 very different Olmsted parks in Connecticut: Seaside, Walnut Hill, Beardsley, and he really recently added a tour of Morningside Park in Harlem. So tonight, Mark Roessler, who I'm sure will do a great job filling in the gaps on Fredrick Law Olmstead. Mark?
Hello, everybody. Just as a quick disclaimer, I'm not a landscape architect, nor am I an architect. I am a writer and a reporter, and somebody who is, as the introduction said, has loved Olmstead his whole life. I wrote this book last year. It came out. It's Fairstead, Reflections on How Olmstead Helped Heal a Fractured Democracy. Fairstead is the home and offices of Fredrick Law Olmstead out in Brookline. And I went there in 2019, and it took me about a day to photograph the grounds and the house, but it took me about 5 years to write the book. And the reason for this is that as I said, I've loved Olmstead all my life, but as I've grown up, I've slowly begun to realize that my interest and my understanding of Olmstead really doesn't jibe with the rest of the world. And it's my belief that Olmstead, he designed parks less. People know him as the father of landscape architecture, which is not entirely true. I don't, and many people frame what Olmstead did in his life as professional, and his successes were professional ones. I think he had a passion, and I think that he was trying to fix America. And in a lot of ways, what he did with parks and park design was a response to the Civil War. And a lot of, I think, of his thinking has been lost. So this talk is about my book. It will go into Fairstead, but I also want to talk a bit about how he became a park designer. So first of all, let's go to Fairstead, and this is a little film I did, and it will show you the grounds and the house where he established his business. And the music's by Gideon Freudman, a friend of mine. So that's a little tour of the house and the grounds. Just a couple notes about the house and the grounds. Olmstead didn't move here to Brookline until late in his career. It was in the early 1880s. And he'd done most of his career up until that point in Manhattan in a number of houses that he rented. This was the first house he had bought. It was a big deal for his family to move up there. And as you can see, the grounds, to my eye and to his as well, were in some ways reflective of his design. You have the lawns, you have the rocky path, the turnaround. There's other little areas in the space too, but he really wanted the house to be a showroom, so people who came to the house had an understanding of what he was going to do for them. The house, for him and the business, he was doing very well, obviously, and he'd gotten to such a point that he was able to buy the house and the business. He moved to Brookline largely because he wanted to be near Boston, which is where the Emerald Necklace was being built. He also was friends with H.H. Richardson, who is the famous architect, who also lived in Brookline, and Olmstead moved to be near Richardson, and he had also seen Richardson's setup, which was very much like this, with a house and an office attached. Olmstead became enamored with that approach, and that's one of the reasons he moved to Brookline. My fascination is with Olmstead Sr., who was the first of the Olmsteads and who established this. There are other Olmsteads, and they are the ones who were mostly involved with Longmeadow. But just to give a quick overview, Fredrick Law Olmstead was born in 1822, died in 1903. He retired earlier than that, though. This is his stepson, John Charles Olmstead, who inherited the business. And then this is Frederick Law Olmstead Jr., who was his actual son, and together those two ran the business after Olmstead retired until 1920, when John Charles Olmstead died, and Jr. took over the business. They worked in a style which was what Olmstead developed, but Olmstead was very popular, obviously, in his lifetime and much in demand. In around the 1880s, when they moved to Fairstead, a lot of the business moved over to John Charles. And when people would write Olmstead letters, they would often hear from John Charles, which was, guess what, not what they really wanted to hear from. But John Charles was with Olmstead really through all of his career, and had a real understanding of Olmstead in a way that I don't believe his son Jr. did. They're all highly skilled, highly talented landscape architects, but I believe that Olmstead, like I had said earlier, really came to this with a passion and an interest in how the world worked, and saw problems and wanted to address them with landscape architecture. So anyway, one of the reasons it took me a long time to write the book was I kept encountering this myth about Olmstead. Now, he was an author before he was a park designer. When he got to Central Park, he had never designed anything in his entire life. But he had been an author, and we're going to get into sort of his background and why he got the job in Central Park and how it evolved. But here's some of the myths that are only kind of true about Olmstead. Olmstead and Vaux were designers of Central Park. They were involved, yes. They didn't get to select the site. There were many issues about the site that they didn't want there to be. And there were many other people involved with the park design other than Olmstead and Vaux. And as I said, he really hadn't designed anything prior to that, whereas Vaux had a career. Anyway, the success, it's often believed, the story is that Olmstead designed Central Park It was very popular. There was the Civil War. That was a hiatus. And then he went back to designing parks and went on to an amazing, illustrious career. This, as we will discuss, is not really how it went down. On his own, this is true. Olmstead designed projects like the U.S. Capitol grounds, the Biltmore Estate, many universities, and the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. And then he is the father of landscape architecture. And I'll get into discussing a little bit why he's called that, but suffice it to say, he learned it, the skills he learned from other people. So father, I'm not so sure. But anyway, the next is a little overview video, and it explains, again, it has music by my cellist friend Gideon, and it explains the early years of Central Park and what happened there. So here we go with that. Yeah, so didn't go so well with Central Park initially. There were other reasons that he quit. It wasn't just being upset with Central Park's leadership, though that was really the main reason. In the years that Central Park started, he lost his brother, John, to tuberculosis. They had their first child. Well, then he married John's wife, Mary, and adopted their children. And then Frederick and Mary had another child while they were in Central Park who died. And he was in a terrible accident in a carriage, and he shattered his leg, and he almost died. So there were a lot. He also, up until Central Park, he had never had a family. He'd never had children. So a lot hit him very hard during those years. But the chief element that really was the reason that he left was he was struggling to get the police force in Central Park up and running. He had been given, this is just a detail, he had been given, the park had seen that he was not doing well, and that he had been given a tour, the opportunity to go to England to see the parks and to talk, and to France and to Europe, to talk to the other park people, to learn about it so that he could bring the knowledge back here, which he did. But if you look at his records, he spent as much time talking to police departments as he did talking to park people. And when he came back, his report about the parks was, Olmstead loved to write. He wrote so much, but when he came back from that trip, he had very little to say about the parks, but a lot to say about the police. And he was very adamant that he have the right to select the people who worked in his police department. The Parks Department saw this as a cushy job and would often get their brothers to, and there was a lot of picking and choosing that Olmstead thought was not reasonable or fair, and he left the park for those reasons. I bring this picture up. This is a park that Olmstead and Vaux designed. It was their last park together. It was done in the 1890s, and it was to celebrate Andrew Jackson Downing, who was mentioned in the video. And Downing was, as I said, the person who taught Vaux landscape design, and through his example really taught Olmstead a lot of what he came to learn. And if you read Downing's writings, to me at least, you can hear Olmstead's voice in them very loudly. And to me, Downing is the wellspring from which his politics, Olmstead's politics, came from. And it says it's small here, so you probably can't see, but they insist that he's the father of landscape architecture, Downing. So we can have it out later, but there you go. When he quit, he did look for work, and he did find work in Lincoln's government, working for the Sanitary Commission. The Sanitary Commission's job was, they were essentially the Red Cross, and he helped establish a lot of the systems that now exist with the Red Cross. One of the issues that he had during the Civil War was that people didn't want to donate to the general cause. They wanted to donate to their battalion of their hometown. And Olmstead did a lot of work in trying to get people to understand that helping everybody was helping individuals as well. They were also involved in creating an ambulance service that was second to none in the world. Olmstead saw the conditions of the hospitals and saw how the wounded were being treated. This is an example of the wounded being brought from the battlefield, and he really revolutionized it. But this job for the Sanitary Commission lasted 18 months, and you might not be surprised to find out that he got into a quarrel with his superiors, and it was generally agreed that he was very good with his employees, but he didn't work so well with his employers. So 18 months into the Sanitary Commission, he was getting ill, and illness was something that followed him around a lot. I believe it was triggered by stress to a great degree, but he would lose his sight. He'd become enfeebled, and to such a degree that his family worried about his life. Anyway, he got this job opportunity. The next logical thing, of course, would be to manage a mine out in California. But he got this offer, and at the time it seemed like the perfect thing for him. And so he was going to travel to California to manage this mine that had done very well in the gold rush, which was in its waning years. And I use this map to show you this was just before the Civil War, and obviously there was no United States here. This was all open territory. It was Native American territory, and it was considered very dangerous to travel through. You only did it if you had no other choice, and Olmstead did. So he took a steamboat and he went down to Panama, took a train across Panama, and then took a boat back up to California. But again, his understanding of California, and he had never been there. He was a very widely traveled person, but he had never been to California, and he'd certainly never encountered Native Americans. But when he got to California, this is more or less what he found. It was still a very much a beginning place, being built up. It was not the metropolis we know now. The next video I'm going to go skips ahead a little bit in our story because he is going to go to Yosemite. But I just wanted to give everybody a sense of where the mine was in relationship to San Francisco, and then where Yosemite was in relationship to the mine. So this is a very quick video just that will give you that sense. And obviously this is San Francisco today. But he traveled in by boat and then stagecoach to go to Bear Valley, where the mines were, which was down in the valleys and dusty and hot. And then we'll go there later, but later he went to Yosemite, which, as you can see, was it was not next door. It was not an easy trip to get there. When he got out there, he was depressed still. He was managing this mine. And again, I'll jump a little ahead in the story just to let you know that he believed that he was going over there with a free hand to do whatever he could to resuscitate and to revive the mines. He was told that he was going to be given a healthy budget to do it, and he got over there. And spoiler alert, he really was hired to be the scapegoat. And when he got out there, he had a very hard time. Well, he never got any money out of New York, which is where the managers were. And he struggled. But while he was out there, he started writing again. I mentioned the two earlier books. One was on a trip to England, and another one was on his travels down south before the war, witnessing what was happening with slavery and what was happening in the country. He stopped writing after that to work on Central Park, but when he got out to California, he started working on this book, which it's been published as part of his papers, but not a standalone volume. And it's called Notes on the Pioneer Condition. And he goes into great detail. He really, he became enchanted with California. After an initial sort of too hot, too flat, what am I doing here? He really started to enjoy the people and to enjoy pioneers and this sense of being out and beyond the law. And you know, in a lot of ways, his recollections read a little bit like Poindexter goes to Deadwood. You know, he's this bookish, slight man, and he's talking about gunslingers, and he's talking about all kinds of what we know as the Wild West. And yet he is seeing a spirit out there that he comes to declare that the Americans are all pioneers. Whether or not you are out on the edge of the wilderness or in a city, we are all pioneers. And what he meant by that was that whereas in Europe, you're known by your profession, which is usually your father's profession and was their father's profession. In America, you're known as yourself. And if you were a lawyer one day, but you also know how to put shoes on a horse the next day, that's okay. You can do both things. And there was a real generosity of spirit that he found while he was out there. And an understanding also that even though there wasn't law, and if we remember back to his days in Central Park where he was really interested in law, he found in California, even though the law was rather thin, people behaved themselves and they treated each other kindly. This really was important to him, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in a second. He also, while he was out in California, he started writing letters to Calvert Vaux, who he had left in the dirt and said, goodbye, I'm not doing that with you anymore, I'm going to go off and do my own career. And Calvert Vaux started writing these very gentle letters saying, yeah, maybe you should rethink things a little bit. And they did. To me, it's this incredible correspondence of tough love, where Vaux is really gently laying it on thick and suggests that maybe Olmstead had gone astray in a few places, but maybe park design is his future. So anyway, through the correspondence is long and took years, but the key points, I've melted them down for you. But the first one was that the park's design was critical to Central Park's success. This is something Olmstead did not really acknowledge until this conversation through the letters with Vaux. He really thought that the police were going to help make the park work, and that outside influences were going to make these people behave, and that there were things that he could do as a superintendent to make the thing work. Vaux really convinced him that the thing that they did was created a beautiful park. And that was what was going to get them the results that they were looking for, which was a civilization of humanity. And they came to understand that the police were really counterproductive for that effect. And incidentally, I should say that Olmstead instigated the police stayed there. They didn't disappear when Olmstead disappeared. They left in the early 1900s. The video I showed you was actually taken by Edison, and it is of the park police. But Olmstead never used the park police again after Central Park and after this conversation with Vaux. And Vaux said as an administrator, Olmstead was an obnoxious autocrat, and he called him the czar of the police, and said, when you're like that, I don't want to be around you. But when you are an artist, he liked working with him, and he thought that he was an incredible asset. And in this conversation, which took a long time, Vaux convinced Olmstead that he was an artist. Olmstead really resisted this very strongly. He didn't like the idea. He thought this was something that other people bestow upon you. And a lot of his biographers sort of dismissed this, but I think it's absolutely critical to what happened to his future life, because what Vaux was saying was, you can't work for other people. You can't be part of government. You need to be an independent contractor that comes in, does your own thing. If it works, great. If it doesn't, which it often doesn't, goodbye, you move on to the next thing. That's what I think Vaux was talking about as being an artist, as being somebody who's not trying to battle the other administrators in the park, but rather it comes with a view and a vision that they don't have. And that is how things worked eventually. The Mariposa gold mine output continues to decline. The funding, as I said, never came up. This picture is not of that mine, but of another one near Yosemite. It's getting hot. He's not hearing from New York. It's particularly hot down in the valleys where they are. And so what he decides he's going to do is he's going to take his family on a vacation up to Yosemite. Over to Yosemite, as you saw before. There was no roads going to Yosemite. It had only recently been discovered by white people. There were efforts afoot to try to build lodges in it. People were worried that what had happened to Niagara Falls, and back then you could not visit Niagara Falls without paying money if you wanted to see the waterfalls. The waterfalls were obstructed by fences, hotels, and ticket takers. So if you wanted to go see them, you needed to pay a fee. And people were very worried that this was what was going to happen to Yosemite. Olmstead knew this, but he went out really just because he'd heard incredible things about it. So he packed his family up, all the kids. They had a nanny, they had a cook, they had a guide. They went off into the mountains. They stayed with a logger out there, and they eventually made it to Yosemite. But while they were in Yosemite, this amazing thing happens. They are camped out by the river, and one morning, Olmstead wakes and he can hear this murmuring outside of his tent, and he can't really figure out what it is. So he gets up and he looks out, and he sees that just across the waterway, there's an encampment of Native Americans. And there is one of the Native Americans is giving a speech of some sort, and he gets his cook, who has lived with the Indians, and gets them to hear what's happening. And the chief, the tribesman, is explaining, is having a religious ceremony, and it turns out that what happens is that the Native Americans come to this place in the river, they grab the roots from nearby, and they flog the water with it, which intoxicates the fish, and the fish swim, they go to the belly up, and they're easy to pick out of the river. And so they happen to be camping right next to where this happens. And while they're there, other families come, and quite an encampment happens next to theirs. They start bartering for food, but the detail which is lost very much in the footnotes of the Olmstead papers, but to me is really relevant, is that his children started playing with the Native American children. And they lived out there, they were out there for 6 weeks, which again, to me, like, who goes on vacation for 6 weeks to Yosemite where there's nobody? It's amazing. And during the 6 weeks, Olmstead, this geology crew comes through the park, which is not a park at the time, but and they are going to survey the mountains further east, and Olmstead decides he's going to go along. And again, Olmstead had broken his leg just a few years ago, was not the most robust person, but he goes out with John Charles, his son, and they go on this incredible ride with these geologists. They name a mountain that they've discovered. They get to the very edge of the Sierra Nevadas and can see the desert. But to me, this is just an astonishing bonding moment between Senior and his son-in-law, well, his son, who he adopted. And I think it is fundamental to who they were and how they progressed, which we'll get into in a second. These pictures were taken by Carlton Watkins, who was a photographer, and these are pictures from right around the time Olmstead was out there. When he got back from his summer out in Yosemite, it turned out that the governor of California had decided that because they were worried about what was happening in Niagara, and they were worried the same thing was going to happen to Yosemite, unbeknownst to Olmstead, he had been named the man to study Yosemite and come up with a plan to save it. So he returned, and this is a picture of his children while they're out there, which I find darling, and just not what you picture landscape architect children looking like, I think. But anyway, when he got out there, when he got back, he found out that he was in charge of researching and coming up with a report on what to do with Yosemite and how to protect it. And so he spends the next year working on this report out in California, and it's released, and it's to me it's the indication that Olmstead finally gets it about parks, and that he understands that parks are places that, just like with the Native Americans and his children, where strangers can meet and they can form bonds, and they can treat one another with kindness. And to him, this is how democracy is built, person by person. And again, John Charles was there at the beginning. He was there when Olmstead decided that he was going to return to Brooklyn, where his friend Vaux had secured them a job with Prospect Park. This is a picture of the Colfax Party, which was the final group that came out the year after Olmstead had been there with his family. And you can see Olmstead and his wife, and one of the other reasons I like this picture is that Olmstead really did include his family for his entire career. And here's an indication right where he's starting to decide he's going to come back to landscape architecture. He's there with his wife. And the other thing was that in this report that he writes, he states for the first time that in a democratic nation, it's a right to people to have access to beautiful natural surroundings. And this comes directly out of the kinds of things that Downing had been saying earlier. And again, the fact that he's bringing up Downing while he's out in Yosemite, to me, is an indication that the gears are turning and that there's a new Olmstead about to come. And so they return and they go to Prospect and to Brooklyn. I'm sorry, I just came from Buffalo, so where there are other Olmstead parks. But in Brooklyn, they've been given the task of building Prospect Park. And this is a park where, unlike Central Park, they had complete say about where it went. They suggested that it be larger and they move in a certain direction than it had been built. And there's a number of other factors, but this was really their first park together where they were doing what they wanted to do. If you look at the park report for Central Park that he did about 8 years earlier, it's a really dry document. It's really like what you would get from a contractor who's going to build an addition to your house. It says, you know, we're going to build a pond here, a ditch there. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. But when he gets to Prospect Park, it's like he's writing a sermon. He's not writing for park commissioners. He's writing this manifesto, essentially, to the people of Brooklyn, saying that we are going to give you a place where you can come and you can join together and have a near spiritual time. He really changes the language considerably with the Prospect Park, and they begin to build it together. But also when they go back to, when Olmstead comes back, Central Park has had 5 years to sort of develop and for people to come to it and for New Yorkers to understand the park and to see how it's used. And I believe that, well, Olmstead in his letters says, after going to the park, Central Park, after 5 years, his vision of what the park could and should be is utterly changed. He's astonished to find that people let their daughters, their 12, 10-year-old daughters, go wherever they want in the park without chaperoning. To him, now a new father, he finds this amazing. But the other thing he finds is that he talks to doctors in the city, and the doctors said that before the Central Park was built, they would often prescribe that you should go to the country, go to Saratoga Springs, go. But now what they prescribe is take a walk in the park. And this was what the doctors were recommending. And to Olmstead, this was, again, a real light bulb change and a real understanding that the parks can be used for multiple purposes and that they're also healing. Olmstead went on to design more than 40 parks after Central Park. This is a list of some of them. He got a bunch of commissions while he was doing Prospect Park in Brooklyn to do other smaller parks, including Fort Greene Park, which is another one I've taken a tour of. And as I've said in the introduction, my goal is to photograph all of these. I certainly didn't know he had done 40 when I started this. I thought he had done maybe 10. But they're all over the country. And I just, as I said, just got back from Buffalo. I was there last week. I was there for a little over a week photographing their park system out there. And not to get, this is pretty much the end of my speech, but one of the things with Buffalo was that he was able to build a parkway. And parkways were these ideas that there was parks that were connected by parkways, which would be big grass lawns. And they tried to do that a little bit in Brooklyn with Prospect Park. There's an avenue coming off of it, which was intended to be a parkway that was going to connect with Coney Island. It never was built out, but the beginnings of the parkway are there. In Buffalo, the parkways are there, and they are well kept. And they transform the city in a way that I had never really understood, because it basically gives people parkland right outside their front door. They don't have to go to the park. It's there. They get their blankets, their books, their dinners, and the sense of community I experienced when I was out there was eye-opening. Anyway, he designed many. He designed big systems in Chicago, in Rochester, New York, Milwaukee, and Louisville. He also did up in Mont Royal, up in Canada. And I get to circle back and just emphasize, I think that what Olmstead was doing, and it bears out in his letters, is that he was horrified, like everyone else, by what happened in the Civil War, and he was appalled also at how people lived and worked in cities. And what he wanted to do with Vox were build parks not just as places where one could experience environment and be at one with nature, but a place where we could experience one another and where we could see one another. And when I've been going to the parks in New York City and Buffalo, what I'm really looking for is a sense of community, and I find it every time I go there. And I find, even though we're living in these troubled times, I find people getting together, enjoying one another's company, even though they're strangers. And to my mind, what his parks were and are and should be are places that rejuvenate our sense of democracy and strengthen it. And I believe that that's what he wanted to do and did. And the reason I'm photographing those parks is to try to show that they are vibrant and working just like they were always intended to. And there's Prospect Park looking wonderful on a hot day. I also said that I was going to talk a little bit about Longmeadow and the Olmsteads here. As I've said, my expertise is really in senior. It's not in the younger fellows. But they're the ones that were involved with Colony Hills and a number of the parks that are here. Forest Park, some people think that it was an Olmstead or that he was involved. There's evidence that he was asked questions by the designers in letters, but he really was not, it was not one of his projects. But Colony Hills here you can see butts Forest Park, and I don't, you people probably know more about this than I do, but you can tell me afterwards. But here's the first part of what Colony Hills is, and north is this way, so the park is here, and these are the winding roads that were put in. Olmstead himself, this is very much, looks like one of his other plans, and I'll show you. Then it was added on to, after the first one was down here, and then the second one was added there. It's, you know, it's quintessential. We have the curving roads, curvilinear roads. One of the reasons Olmstead really liked curving roads was he felt that it slowed people down. And he felt that when you had a long straightaway, you saw the end point and you didn't see anything in between. You tried to get to the end point as fast as you could. So he would break up his roadways in parks and also in these communities to try to give people different vistas. So, you know, you're standing here and you're looking down this road, you're not going to see the end. You're going to see forest and you're going to see other things, which will give you a better sense of being out in nature and not being on a grid. And I just rotated that map to sort of show you where the park is, and then we'll switch into it. So this right here is it, and it's kind of hard to see because of all the trees, but there it is again. And again, this is Riverside, which is one of the housing communities that Vaux and Olmstead did do out near Chicago. And, you know, it's very similar in sort of approach. And it's also similar to the subject of my first book, World's End, which was out in Hingham. And this is this set of islands that John Brewer wanted to turn into a housing. It was a farm, and he wanted to sell houses out there, and he got Olmstead out there, and Olmstead designed a very beautiful pathway. And then John Brewer died, and his family said, no, we're not going to build houses out there. It's beautiful land. So it is beautiful land, and it has these paths running around it, which was like a housing development, but now it's very much like a park. And if you're ever out there, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful, beautiful space. It's right out in the bay. All of this is water around it. And I know I'm not talking about Longmeadow, but just a quick note. This was various times over the last 50 years, there were ideas for what they would do out there. And right out on that island, one idea was originally to put the United Nations out there, and the worst idea was to put a nuclear power plant. Thankfully, neither of those things happened. And this final image, I just wanted to show you, this is some of the drawings from World's End. I couldn't find anything like this compared with Longmeadow, but I know some people think that the lines are sort of arbitrary. But what I really enjoy here is seeing all the erased pieces, and just the amount of work that went into figuring out how these properties should be flowing with the landscape was considerable. And anyway, oh, and this is a picture of Longmeadow when it's being developed. And I thought what was interesting was usually when you see housing developments, the trees are all down, but here they clearly wanted to keep the trees. Because they wanted to keep it green, and it was close to the park. And there's a picture from 1929 of what it looked like. And there's 1933, which is pretty similar to what we have today. So I put that up. If anybody wants to subscribe to my newsletter, it's on my website. I try to come out once a month with it. I announce new tours. The tour I'm announcing now is Morningside Park, which I just did. You can go visit the entire park, wander around it at your leisure. And with it, I also have all the Connecticut parks, and I'm working on the Massachusetts parks, and this fall we'll have Buffalo up there as well. So, thank you. Yes.
Mark, would you please let people know number one about the postcards you got back?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And could you say a few words
Sure. No, I'd be happy to. A copy of my book is back there for you to look at if you're interested, and I also have postcards that have QR codes that will show you where to buy it if you're interested. And I have business cards if you want to do business with me. Yes. Well, as I said in the piece, Vaux was British, and he was hired by Downing to come and help him. Downing was a horticulturalist and a writer. He was not a designer. He didn't draw plans, so he needed somebody to do that. He went to London. Vaux was a young student who was displaying watercolor works and drawings. Downing saw him and brought him over, and they worked together for about 2 years before Downing died. During that time, Olmstead did visit Downing in Newburgh, mostly to tell him about the park that he had seen in outside in England. And it's what he wrote about. But anyway, they met at some point at Downing's house, Vaux and Olmstead. Years later, Olmstead has got the job as superintendent at Central Park. And like I said in the thing, the idea for Central Park had been around for some time, and it really seemed like Downing was going to be the one who would design it. Downing was designing a similar park, a very large park in Washington, D.C., when he died, and it was believed that after that he would do New York. So anyway, Olmstead was working as a superintendent. Vaux still lived in Newburgh, was still working as an architect. Vaux did not like the designs that were being proposed for Central Park, and so he sort of sneakily suggested, why don't we have a contest? And they did, and Vaux went to Olmstead and said we should collaborate on and why he did that, a lot of people think that it was for a leg up, because Olmstead really knew the property. He'd been the superintendent for about a year then, really knew the property. So Vaux could have been using him sort of as a way to get in. But I think that the real reason that they got together was that they had a love of Downing, and they really understood Downing in a way that most people didn't. And they understood what this park could mean and could be in a way that others didn't. And that's why they got together. And just it's always been an issue throughout even while they were alive, Vaux always felt that Olmstead was getting way more of the credit than he should. And Olmstead always insisted that Vaux was half the partnership. But Andrew Green, the controller from Central Park that Olmstead feuded with, that feud lasted their whole lives. And they met up and they encountered each other on several important occasions. And Andrew Green always maintained that Vaux was the genius and Olmstead was the hanger-on. I think, but for me, I think that Vaux's dedication to Olmstead and his certainty that Olmstead needed to be part of the partnership is really all the indication, all the proof I need that Olmstead was important. And then Olmstead was not a landscape architect in the way that most of us think about landscape architects. He was a writer, a thinker. He couldn't draw. Cameras weren't around, but he could describe and he could work with people who could. So I do think it's true that in a lot of ways Vaux was the artist between the two of them in terms of graphical, but in terms of thinking and being able to convey his thoughts and thinking bigger thoughts than a pretty space with a garden in it, I think that was Olmstead. So that's a long answer to your short question. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Olmstead had a lot of connections to the national parks after the West was happening in the 70s.
That's a very good question. Yeah, the question is does Olmstead have connections to the national parks? And he does. He most certainly does. The report that he wrote when he out there, the Yosemite report, was really, again, the first document that said that we have a right to these spaces. It was well received at the time, but not much happened with it. It was buried. Later, Junior, his son, came out with it, and when national parks in the 40s and 50s were becoming a bigger thing, he referred to that report and made it very much part of what they were doing. But when Olmstead went out to Yosemite and he saw Yosemite, and he made that statement, yeah, that was the beginning of the parks movement. A lot of people try to say that that the idea for Yosemite came from a bunch of white guys sitting around a fireplace, a fire, and hey, wouldn't it be a great idea? But Olmstead was really the first person to state that, and I know and when he went out to Niagara and he saw things as I described, later in his life, actually when he was working on Buffalo, he decided that this needed to change, and that Niagara needed to be in a natural setting, and it needed to be free access to everyone. And he mounted a campaign that took him, I think, 12 years. But essentially, they got factories taken out of there that were redirecting the flow. They bought up land so that they could replant it and no longer have hotels there. And that effort to free Niagara was in many, many ways the start of the environmental movement in America. It was really the first effort in that regard. And Niagara Falls is the first national park, entirely because of Olmstead. So yeah, parks, national, small, large, that was Olmstead. Anyone else? Well, thank you. Thank you very much.